there.
Guten Abend an allen. Also es ist wirklich eine Ehre, diese Person zu präsentieren. Wir haben uns vor anderthalb Jahren kennengelernt, unter sehr besonderen Umständen. Viele gute Pianisten, die sehr gute Freunde sind, haben mich wunderbare Aspekte von der Arbeit dieses Mannes erzählt. Wir haben uns in Serbien vor 15 Monaten kennengelernt. Ich war dort, ich habe an einem Wettbewerb teilgenommen und mir war es unheimlich interessant, diese Verbindung zwischen Feldenkreis, technische Aspekte und Atmung. Wenn man etwas musiziert, wenn man ein Instrument spielt oder einfach auf der Bühne steht. Und ja, diese Zusammenarbeit angefangen. Ich bin sehr gerne immer wieder, also ich bekomme Unterricht und Unterstützung immer wieder von ihm. In alle Hinsichten, wunderbarer Musiker, wunderbarer Mann. Jetzt ist er hier mit uns. Er arbeitet, also dieses Seminar ist für uns seine Arbeit und die Sicht des Feldenkreises ein bisschen zu erläutern. So, vielleicht gibt es Personen, die überhaupt nichts von diesen Disziplinen kennt. Ich war einige von denen vor 2 Jahren. Morgen, Montag und Dienstag gibt es One-on-One Privatunterrichten. Dann nach dieses Kurses wird eine Liste aufgesetzt. Diejenigen, die interessant die Kurs gefunden haben, und dann könnten diese Personen einen Unterricht mit Alan bekommen. Also jeweils. Er ist hier für uns zu unterstützen und diese Vision der Musik zu erweitern. Also dann einfach ein großes Applaudissement.
Genau. I didn't understand any of that. My German is atrociously bad. Literally, I heard Arbeit somewhere. That's about the extent of it. So, thank you, Raphael. Thank you for organizing this, and thank you, Sabine Sauer, for also getting us the hall. Yay! And thank you all for being here. So, you've all come because you're curious about this, what I call Piano Somatics, which is the application of the Feldenkrais method to the piano. So, how many people here know absolutely nothing about Feldenkrais? How many? Oh, okay, about a half a dozen. Yeah. So the rest of you are sort of familiar with it a little bit. Explaining Feldenkrais to somebody who's never done it is like explaining color to a blind man. There's just no medium except experiencing it. But I'm going to try anyway. I grew up in Montreal. I had a piano teacher who was very interested in the relationship of the body to the way we play. And his pianistic grandfather was Alfred Cortot. One of the things Cortot really spoke a lot about was this idea that the arm is used to sculpt the phrase, that the specific contour of the phrase, of the movement of the arm has an effect on the emotional content and the fluidity and the actual shape of the phrase, where it's not just about crescendo diminuendo, but about more subtle interactions of dynamic and agogics that happen when the arm is flowing laterally in undulation movements. So this is a very important concept because it kind of it goes against the idea that we use the weight of the arm to help move the key. Because of course the weighted movements are vertical movements, but Cortot talked about this horizontal thing. So they would seem to be at odds. Actually both are useful in playing the piano. but we have the greatest amount of choice available to us when we actually are aware of which of those two techniques we're using or how we're combining those two techniques. And where Feldenkrais comes in is that Feldenkrais method deals with human movement from the point of view of the skeleton, which is a peculiar way of looking at things. Most physiotherapists and athletes, we all talk about the muscles. We have to train the muscles in order to move well and to make them strong so that we can do what we want. But of course, all muscles are attached to bones. If we had no bones, we would be like a formless jellyfish. And Moshe Feldenkrais discovered that if you do micro movements of the bones, of the skeleton, that the brain, which is responsible for sending signals to the muscles, starts to get a clearer picture of, oh, wait a minute, this bone wants to go over here, but like 1/10 of a millimeter. And oh, this bone, and of course all of a sudden the brain starts feeling that I'm holding on to this muscle too much, that bone can't go there. And what if it just let go? So these micro movements, which would seem to be totally meaningless, they activate a part of the brain called the motor cortex, which is always actually dealing with what we do. When you're playing Chopin Opus 10 number 1, you're not going, oh, use the flexor pollicis to descend the thumb here, and then use the lumbrical to use to move the second finger, and use this interosseous bone to move the fourth finger, and use the there are hundreds of muscular commands that must happen in every second of time if we're playing virtuosic repertoire, and none of that is done with the conscious mind. It's all on automatic. Many of the impulses actually come from the brain stem rather than the motor cortex proper. But all those reflexes must be learned. And when we find a way of intervening with the functioning of the motor cortex, we can improve how we move at the piano. So Feldenkrais deals with the skeleton, the leverages of the skeleton. Every truly efficient movement will be perceived as effortless. So if you see a pianist go, oh, they're doing so much to create their forte and their expression. They're full of effort. And of course, the ideal is in this regard is horrible. So just seem to sit there doing nothing. There's no effort. But there's a high degree of focus and there's a high degree of freedom. That stillness is not stiffness. That stillness is a freedom to move that's largely internalized, because then it's most efficient. So that's what you get when you visualize the skeleton doing things and free the muscles from overwork. Well, how can we go about that practically speaking? Well, I don't know how many pianists have ever thought about this, but perhaps because I was a Feldenkrais practitioner and dealing with how to stand up easily, how to sit beautifully without effort, how to stand and walk beautifully without extraneous effort, all of a sudden this sitting, standing, walking, and then looking at what the fingers do on key, oh my God, it's a mini body. The hand is actually just a miniature replication of the body, with an ankle and a knee and a hip joint and a pelvis, and the wrist in that case would be L5S1, the bottom of the spine, where the vertebral column sits on the pelvis, and this the forearm would be the torso. The elbow would actually be the head. And so if I play like this with this weighted touch, that would be like walking down the street like this. Using my weight, feeling my weight, in order to make sure that I have contact with the ground. Oh my God, I'm afraid I might just float off into the stratosphere if I don't have contact with the ground. I better use my weight. Yeah, well, of course nobody walks like that, because you get out of the chair, the gravity already attached you to the ground. You don't have to help gravity do that. The function of the human body is to stand tall. in the field of gravity. Gravity shows me which way is up. Gravity shows me how to balance, not by fighting against gravity, not by losing to gravity, but by using gravity to extend. So the equivalent at the piano would be not to fall into the key. I'm doing kind of a caricature. You know, many people use that technique and they use it very beautifully. But I'm trying to show that when I fall in like that, there's a certain segmented quality to the melody. Every note is expressive. And if I just thought about, oh, I'm going to stand up, actually it works best if you don't even think about playing the piano, pushing the key down. I'm just going to stand up. And the key goes down by accident. The hammer gets flung onto the string by accident, and my arm is now floating. Oh, I'll walk over here. I'll walk over here. I'll walk over here. I'll walk over here. Sometimes I lay down. That's a different thing. But did you see, when I walk in normal life, actually what happens is I don't take a step and then my body follows. Actually what happens is I lose my balance. My body's already in motion. My body, I walk. My body's in motion. I already walk. My body's in motion. So the body goes first and then the legs, they snake out and they get my balance point, my balance point, my balance point. And the legs create a series of overlapping, unfolding balance points. And then if I add a choreography to it, it becomes artistic. So that's what I was doing. My arm is already in motion. Now my arm is already over here in the E flat. My arm is already over the D flat. Just for the purposes of the argument, I extended this note by slowing down how I floated my arm. And then by speeding up how I walk over here. It's creating, it's sculpting sound, it's creating a choreography in sound. And the physical means for doing that is this arm. It's like there's a little musical brain right in here and another one right in here, and they're spinning out the music. They're creating the actual shape of the elocution, the rhetorical statement as it's unfolding. So it's quite a different aesthetic from the way we've been taught to play, which is that the piano key is heavier than the harpsichord key, therefore it needs more weight coming from the arm. Here, the weight of the arm is definitely in play, but the hand is not forced to carry that weight. The hand responds so instantaneously to that weight that I'm already in movement. I'm already in movement. I'm already in movement. The series of overlapping melodic elements is the same as a series of overlapping steps in normal human walking. So I'm sort of interested to how many of you find this to be a totally radical, new, unfamiliar idea? And okay, not very many. How many of you are sort of familiar with us already? Yeah, okay. Yeah. So it looks like I'm preaching to the converted in a certain way. playing forte takes on a totally different tone when you bring this idea of skeletal dynamics and how does the human body work. Most people that play forte, they bring more. They bring more weight to the sound, and some people will even come off the bench like that. So the trouble with that is that there's compression, there's compression. And when I think, okay, I'm just going to stand up, the same idea, stand up, stand up, stand up. I'm just going to stand up quicker. Well, I get more capacity for voicing because the fingers feel more individual from each other, and there's a lack of compression. Now, why does that lack of compression open up the sound of the piano? Because listen to the way I did it the first time, and listen to the amount of impact vibration that gets sent into the piano case and into the piano soundboard. Yeah? And now I'm going to... The second one is much louder, but there's no impact. There's no compression. And when less compressive impact vibrations go into the soundboard, you actually get a pure vibration coming out of the soundboard. So that's a physical reason why this stand-up thing actually improves the tone of the piano. Next thought. Normally there's a next thought in here after that one, which totally eludes me for the moment. Yeah, so there's the dynamics, there's phrasing. Yes, there's the arch of the hand. So a little bit about how all this works is the hand is designed to grasp. And when the grasping action comes from the center of the hand, from the lumbrical and the interosseous muscles, then the hand actually folds in on itself. And you can feel that. I don't know whether we're going to do this in the lesson, but if you even block your fingers like this and then kind of, you can sort of accentuate the degree to which the hand is you experience the hand as a bipartite, don't curl your fingers. Try doing that thing, but without curling the fingers at all. So watch. I fold the hand over, and I leave the fingers flat. Fold the hand over, leave the fingers flat. So this shows the hand what happens to the grasping action when there's no curling involved. Now we're not going to never curl our fingers. Of course we're going to curl our fingers. But when the fingers are taught to curl prematurely, then they curl like this, and look, this part of the hand actually went down. You see, like that, if you can feel it. And now, let's dispense with curling, and let's do this thing here, folding the hand like that, but with the hand lying down, and look, an arch is created. So, I went to one competition because I was looking at all these pianists, and I'm thinking to myself, Alan, for years you've been obsessed with the arch of the hand, the keystone of the arch, the second metacarpal phalangeal joints, and when those little hillocks are high, then everything works well, and when they're down, then it's not so good, and the pianist is kind of struggling because there's compression, and here there's no compression. But really, you're too obsessed with that, really. And I listened carefully, and I watched carefully, and it turns out I wasn't obsessed enough, because the more I saw this arch, the more color was in the sound. The more I saw this arch, the more the sound was orchestral and full, and the less I saw it, the more it was kind of this gray, kind of nice sound, but not so full of color and not so powerful. So this keystone of the arch is very, very important, and we isolate the hand, the lumbrical and the interosseous, in order to make the hand feel like, oh yeah, creating this arch is easy for me, natural for me. If you really do it nicely, you'll feel all the underarm, the flexors, the forearm flexors, actually let go, which is a strange kind of a thing. Because normally, if I'm doing this, you think these flexors are going to contract, but you do this, and then actually the flexors can let go. So that that means that your arm is free to do all this lateral sculpting stuff while the hand is busy creating the arch. And then later on you learn to curl, first curve, and then later on curl, without destroying the vitality and the viability of this keystone of the arch. So that's how the hand is developed step by step. So many, you're advanced pianists who probably all already did this years ago. But most of the pianists I work with, I can detect sometimes just a little trace of a little bit of falling here, or a little bit of a verticality in the arm there, or sometimes it's a lack of participation of the whole body. If the nervous system for some reason tends to perceive the human body as, well, if I keep this inert and stable, then that's the best way of controlling all these these complex, fast movements of the fingers. But actually keeping it even, there was a guy, Arnold Schultz, The Riddle of the Pianist's Finger, which is a very fine book written in the 1930s by an American, and he actually says, in order to make the hand move cleanly on the keyboard, fixate the hip joints, which goes against everything we've been talking about, the skeleton as a living, moving series of levers. Barbara Conable, who was an Alexander teacher and developed something called, I forget, even said that the kinematic chain is functioning well when all the bones of the body, when none of the levers are stuck, where all of the levers remain movable. So when this arch comes into being, all my levers will remain movable if, for instance, if I allow my body to come with it. If I push this way and then the body is rocking instead of being held. But that alone goes against the way many of us, we may not even been taught like that, but I've seen it in many pianists. It's just somehow, it's the default to which this complex system, I have to do all this really complex stuff, I better be stable here. And then we lose an important part of this sense of playing with the whole self. Or else we're trying to get that expression in and it becomes a caricature. The type of movement I'm talking about is not this hysterical kind of movement. It's deep and it's quiet and it's very organic and it's all the parts of the skeleton moving in concert. The powerful parts moving less in terms of their amplitude, but so that the distal parts can move with greater speed and greater accuracy. Any questions so far? I mean, I'm just ranting, I'm just riffing, I'm just sort of trying. I wrote 4 books on piano technique, I've got a 5th one on the way. There's over 250 awareness through piano movement lessons in there. There's 100 other ideas, and I'm just trying to throw a few of these ideas out at you in a sort of an introductory way to stimulate your thinking, to see, oh, that's familiar to me. Oh, I already know that. Oh, I never heard that before. It sounds pretty weird to me. Just trying to figure out where we're at and what we know that we know, what we know that we don't know, but also what we don't know that we know and what we don't know that we don't know. Because there's always room for improvement at the piano. That's the one thing I've discovered. Any questions? Yes?
Basically, you are telling if you are pressing the key, you are moving your wrist up. And my question would be, when do you move your hand also down?
Yes.
I mean,
yeah.
It needs to be as an exchange somehow.
Of course. What goes up must come down, but what goes down must come up, right? So that's a very good question, because if I stand up and then stand up again and then stand up again, and then I keep going, there's got to be a down somewhere, because you can't play the piano if you just keep going up. So, and also the way we move our wrist, I would say the main way in which Piano Somatics differs from what I see being done a lot is that the wrist, so again, this part of my body, the bottom of the spine, L5, S1, it's not immovable, it's not fixed, but it's pretty darn stable. I don't walk like this, unless I'm a samba dancer or something. Yeah, normally it's just kind of, everything's moving down there, the legs are moving, the body's moving, but this is not fixed, but it's a stable, fluid balance point. Feldenkrais conceived the body as 3 gyroscopes. So there's a spinning cone like this that goes to the hip joints, and then another one, which is the torso that goes here, and then another one, which is the head. So it's 3 of them spinning one on top of the other. So if this point is it's the bottom of the second gyroscope, it can't really be moving around a lot, but it needs to be very fluid. It needs to be. So again, my wrist is fluid, it's moving up, it's moving down, but you see it never strays that far from the horizontal, the hand and the forearm. The wrist always maintains its awareness that actually I connect the hand and the forearm. I can go here, but if I do this circle, it would because the phrase shape wants me to do that circle. I would never do a circle just to relax because if I stand up well, I'm already relaxed. I don't need to do any circle. So the wrist is this very sensitive balance point. And you see, I stand up, but then of course there's this, I don't call it falling down, it's kind of a wafting down. So I go up and then I kind of angle down, or I swoop down, but I lie down. So there's this undulation which looks like wrist circles, but it's not quite the way I see wrist circles done. There's something organic and it's a little bit like, there's something organic about it. The wrist never loses its sense of joining these two, establishing relationship between hand and forearm. And I see a lot of what I call egg beating, like this. So don't beat the eggs so much. If you're beating eggs, you're not aware of this relationship of a hand to the forearm. Another way of discussing the wrist, which is a huge topic, we can't possibly cover all of the aspects of it here. But rounding out movements are lyrical, and extension movements are dancing and rhythmic, crisp. So many times I'll ask somebody to snap off. Many people do a staccato like this. But of course, that staccato, that's the dot staccato, that's the gentle staccato. The carrot staccato is this one. And I've never found out, is the straight line staccato, is that even sharper than the wedge, or is the wedge the sharpest one? Anyway, the sharper you want it, the more of a snap, the more you move into wrist extension as the fingers are flexing. You see, the fingers flex, but the wrist extends, like this. That's as sharp as you can. As sharp as you can. If I do the other thing with the wrist, flexing the wrist, that's lyricizing it. So I see a lot of people trying to do a really crisp staccato, but they're doing the rounding out movements because that's what they've been taught, and not realizing that it's an aesthetic choice and it should be made consciously. So many times if I get somebody going into this snapping movement, it opens a whole new dimension of possible articulations available to me. And again, now I'm up, well, I float down. If I do this way, I undulate down. So, I don't know if does that answer your question? It's a very difficult topic. Sort of.
Oh, thank you.
Another way of talking about it is, again, in terms of the whole body. So, and it will bring in rotation if we didn't, need to complicate things enough. So, I take a step. My left hip is now higher and more forward and more to the left. And now my right hip is now higher and more forward and more to the right. So actually, the pelvis is doing a figure 8 motion along 3 planes. This way, and this way. Vertically, sideways, and forward and back. So of course, if I exaggerate it, you can see that nobody walks like that. But nobody walks like this either. That would be how we would walk if that subtle movement of the pelvis, a 3-dimensional, maybe it's more of an infinity than a figure 8. So you see, that's how, again, so each hip is going up and down. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down. It's also going sideways, it's also going forward and back. Yeah, how do we do it? Yeah, the cross organization, so that the shoulder goes forward when the diagonal hip goes forward. All that works on the piano with rotation. So this is rotation along the axis of the forearm. And that rotation is always present in piano technique, but mostly microscopically. Sometimes you really see it, sometimes you hardly see it at all. It's like you don't see it in the hip in the pelvis, but if it wasn't there in the pelvis, we'd be walking like that. Which we don't. So obviously it's there. We're so used to it, we don't see it. It's time, isn't it? So there's a little bit of rotation along the forearm. There's a little bit of forward and back, which is the 4th dimension. There's a little bit of up and down. But you see the up, and that's the thumb. I knew there was more. The thumb is different from the fingers. The fingers flex and extend like that, and when the finger flexes, the hand stands up. The thumb does not, well, wait a minute, if the thumb is opposing, as it's supposed to do, how can it be playing the piano? Because the thumb is going up, piano keys go down. Okay, so I'm going to unoppose the thumb, bring it over here, and now at the very beginning of this big arc, that's where it moves the key. But you see, when it moves the key down, everything else goes up. And this, if any of you come to me for a lesson this weekend, we're probably going to be working on your thumbs for part of the time, because most thumbs don't know how to do this as well as they could. I've got people with whom I've been working for years, like one guy who was in Belgrade last week, and we ended up with this, he knows a lot, he's learned a lot from me, but we ended up with this thumb circle. So if you just take your thumb and move it as straight, but as if it was a cone, and you move it in a tiny circle like that, that releases the first dorsal interosseous. It trains the thumb not to be half a thumb, but to be a whole thumb. That's the first thing. The thumb, the thenar group is the thumb's biggest muscle. It's the hand's biggest muscle. The hypothenar, which moves the 5th finger, is the 2nd biggest muscle. And the two of them together, well, I'll tell you a funny story. I made a DVD called The Craft of Piano Playing, and the first picture for the cover of the DVD, it was looking at the hand through here, and then it was superimposed on a cathedral, the front of a cathedral, and it was like the cathedral arch and the hand arch. It was a beautiful artistic drawing. And my father, bless his heart, he took a look at that and he says, "Why do you have somebody's rear end on the cover of your DVD?" So it really looks like, these look like the ass cheeks of the hand, right? So I changed the cover of the DVD, but this idea of these as the ass cheeks remains. So when the thumb stands up, it's not like a finger. The finger stands up, it kind of pulls the hand up into the arch shape. The thumb stands up, it pushes the hand up into that arch shape. And now the thumb is underneath. It's kind of like the flying buttress of a cathedral. Is that anybody, in German, how do you say a flying buttress in German? It's the outside of the cathedral, and it's like a support thing, but there's air inside it. It's a flying buttress. on the outside wall of the cathedral. I should have a PowerPoint presentation with a picture, but I don't. So it's so weird. The thumb basically says, go away, hand, go away, hand. Like that. It's all about separation. It's all about feeling how the thumb is completely different from the fingers. And my teacher, Phil Cohen, said, it's an arm thumb. Because this connection through to the arm is so clear. And see, it goes, look, the fingers go distal phalange, medial phalange, proximal phalange, metacarpal bone, wrist, arm. The thumb goes distal, proximal, metacarpal, arm. It's a direct connection. This thing we did at first, did you notice the thumb was on the other side? The thumb is a bipartite structure. The thumb is on the arm side. The fingers are on the hand side. And developing this real total difference between the thumb and the fingers, most pianists are deficient in this, I'm sorry. I'll put myself in the same. I mean, I've been doing this for 40 years and I still feel like my thumb's got more to learn. So it's generally, there's a lot to be learned just by exploring all the possible ways that the thumb relates to the hand and the arm and how it is fundamentally different from the fingers. So rotation can be along the axis of the arm, so it's like the whole hand, or rotation can be around the thumb. That's it. And then there's movement forward and back, there's movement up and down, and there's movement laterally. So these movements of the hand sideways. Sometimes we do the reverse. Generally people are taught, oh, you take the arm to move. Yeah. So in that case, how will I demonstrate this? So in this case, I would have to move my arm this much in order to get that two octave thing. So what if I just rotate it instead? Sorry. My arm is moving, but it's moving about a quarter of what it would have to move if I did not rotate. So when I play the thing like that, I don't feel like I'm moving at all. So this whole awkward movement is dispensed with. And the idea, as Feldenkrais said, if you were dead and you were only a skeleton and somebody took any one bone and pulled it, all the rest of the skeleton, the bones would sort of follow along. And that is the most efficient way of doing the movement when you're alive. So again, it goes fundamentally against the way we were taught to play. What do you mean? The finger is pulling the arm to the note. Well, the arm carries the finger to the note. Okay, look, when I do this, yes, the arm is still carrying the finger to the note because the finger can't go to the note on the note, but it feels like the finger is pulling the arm, and that makes all the difference. All the muscles organize themselves differently, and the thing feels tremendously efficient, and I feel much less like I'm going to miss. So again, it's just another aspect of this, the up and down, what your original question about the use of the wrist. It opens up a whole Pandora's box, actually, because there's the use of the wrist along 4 planes of movement: forward and back, up and down, sideways, and rotation. So it's incredibly complex, and we can't possibly make decisions with our intellectual mind about all of it. So we have to feed the hand and the body a sensorial experience where the brain starts feeling these relationships and using them to sculpt the music in a new way. So I'm talking in a very theoretical way, but eventually there are exercises which you can do for yourself, which are going to have you start behaving in the spirit of this way of looking at things naturally and organically. That's our goal. We can touch on this in this evening, and then, of course, if you're interested, further explorations in the individual lessons tomorrow and Monday. And in Reutlingen, if anybody wants to come down to Reutlingen on Sunday. Any other questions? Yes?
So I found you're trying to sort of perhaps promote a move away or a rejection of an intrinsic or albeit uninstinctive sort of playing method. I'm wondering sort of perhaps to what purpose, and I'll go further to say I'm in a somewhat unique or unusual position whereby I learned to play piano and later came to the music school and was told by my piano teacher I'm doing everything wrong in terms of wrist movement. And so she's sort of trying to show me sort of, I suppose, teach me the sort of general method of wrist movement and stuff. Are you sort of suggesting an alternative or a better way of doing so? Or?
I like not to use the words better or superior because for one thing it antagonizes people, and I've had people come to me and just say, listen, I think what you're doing is great, but I invested a lot in this. I invested 30 years in all my schooling and the way I teach everything, and I can't just give it up like that. And I completely get it. So it's a very good question. Many people come to me and say, I played piano in a certain way when I was a kid, and then some piano teacher came along and told me it was all wrong, and they taught me this whole other way to do it, and then I either did or did not develop problems. And you, Alan, you're making me play the way I played when I was 5 or when I was 7 or when I was 10. You're reconstituting that way I played when I was a kid. So I've heard this many times. So I don't want to criticize my colleagues. For one thing, it's not collegial, but the other thing, it's a tremendously rich tradition. And I guess from the point of view of Feldenkrais, I'm trying to look at the ideas, like, for instance, Claudio Rau, he said the weighted technique is the sine qua non, and the strength of the hand is the sine qua non of arm weight technique. And he writes in this article where you develop that hand arch by weighting it and then forcing the hand to find its strength, like that, and you dig in and then you throw it up and everything. So I see that the reflexes that I'm looking for in the hand are indeed being cultivated, they're being awakened. The hand is developing a certain strength. I question whether that's the way you should always play, and if you're going to learn it that way, then is there a point at which you use the benefits of this practice to your artistic merit so that they become a freedom rather than a handcuffs? So if I keep doing a didactic experience when I've already learned what it was designed to teach me, then I'm kind of limiting myself. So I'm trying to take the tradition and get clear about elements of the tradition which are sometimes seemingly contradictory. I don't think they are contradictory, but I think, for instance, the whole idea of using the weight can be misinterpreted. I mean, Claudio Arau, you see he's tremendously agile, and he says he did this a lot when he was a young kid to build up the strength of his hand. But in the end, he's playing with this marvelous agility and lightness. There's another quite famous Russian teacher named Gilidov, and I have worked with some people who studied with him, and he was saying, use more weight, and the student is like trying to be heavier and heavier and get more strength out of his arm. And then he demonstrates, and he's tremendously light. He's just tremendously light and facile and lovely tone. And you see, that's how you use more weight. So obviously, there's somewhere in his system, I did this a lot when I was young, and that gave me a certain strength, a certain ability to stand on my feet pianistically. But now he's an artist, he's a musician. so that the memory of this power which that practice gave me stays with him, and it now empowers him to make the music he wants to make. He's not even aware that he's no longer. He feels, yeah, I'm using a lot of weight. And it's obviously, sorry, it's obviously, the hand is functioning well, but it's gone beyond that. So many teachers, I'm not a great pianist. There's thousands of pianists who are better than me. I never had much of a performing career, but I spent my time trying to figure out how to teach this stuff, because I saw many great pianists. Their experience is quite subjective, so they're doing something great, and they do not have the language to impart that to their student. So the best you can do is sort of try to copy them and everything. But simply, they spend all their time developing their artistry, and that's great. But if somebody tells you use a lot of weight, and they're obviously not doing it themselves, or else it has become integrated into their overall artistic practice. And then we try to do it, and we don't know how to integrate it, or we think that continuing to do it like a lot is the way to integrate it. Then people come to me all the time who are injured, who have real serious problems because I've had a guy come and he was like, it was just brutally weighted. Like, there was nothing sophisticated about it at all, because he did what his teachers said, but he didn't do what his teachers do. And this guy, the guy in New York City, it was so bad that he actually had an operation in his, to fix the herniated discs in his neck, because this movement here like pulled on his neck to the point where it was injured. So I don't want to criticize and go against him. Maybe 30 years ago I did. All my books they diss arm weight technique. But I'm trying to diss it less and less, and my next book actually shows how wonderful it is if it's not misunderstood. But I get a lot of people coming to me who they didn't understand it in the best way possible. Yes, Sabine.
I just wanted to say the idea of weight, of using the weight set is to get the arm free.
Yes.
So you don't hold the arm, and that's very difficult. That's right. For children, often it's very difficult.
Yes.
So it's the basic to be free, the weight,
yeah.
isn't it?
So I'll tell you about Carola Grindia, who she started ISTIP. She started ISTIP years ago, and she was mentored by Dame Myra Hess, who was mentored